oftentimes we fall victim to this. And we find ways to separate ourselves from each other. And the simple truth, and that simple truth is that we are all one. We are all in this together. For far too long we have allowed separation and division to weaken us. And we know we can do better. We know what we're capable of together as one American family. Which is what draws me to Bernie Sanders. He shares our vision for the future of America. Now, some would call our vision a revolution. I don't think a fair playing field and being concerned with your neighbor's well-being is a revolutionary idea, do you? That was pretty simple. Kind of like what they taught you in elementary school, right? I don't think being able to earn a debt-free education is a revolutionary idea. Sound like you do either. In fact, I think it's unevolutionary, if that's a word, that in the richest country in human history, that there's somebody out there today that has to choose between paying their mortgage and their cancer treatment. It's not right. What Bernie is proposing, these are not revolutionary ideas. The status quo is actually unevolved. And we have to fight for a higher level of consciousness. So let's not get it twisted, people. Universal health care is a right. It is not a privilege. Just because somebody's rich does not mean that they should live longer than you. Just because you don't have a lot of money does not mean you should die before them. That's very simple. Which is why I have to stand up for Bernie Sanders when he says we need financial reform now, and that our government cannot be beholden to the interests of a few billionaires or special interests. He shares our vision. Which is why I stand up for Bernie Sanders when he says that we need criminal justice reform now. And that it is unacceptable in the self-proclaimed freest nation in the world that we have more people incarcerated than any other nation that we have deemed less free. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but that isn't 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, like, that's kind of weird to me. That's why I have to stand up for Bernie Sanders, and a man who stood up with Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement. And a man who understands that that movement still continues, but not just for African Americans, but for women who deserve an equal rights amendment in our Constitution, that deserve equal pay for equal work. Are you kidding me? That's easy. Let's do that. Also for the LGBT community. That should have no impediments when it comes to marriage or adoption. That is the law of the land. If you don't like it, get out the way. Be on the right side of history. Amen. And also for the dreamers and their families that deserve comprehensive immigration reform policy. And our Muslim and Arab American friends. That do not deserve bigotry or xenophobia. He shares our vision, which is why I have to stand up when Bernie says our children should not have to go to insurmountable debt just to get a college education. He shares our vision, Wisconsin, which is why I'm asking you to stand up for Bernie Sanders right now. And during your primaries tomorrow, I give you a man who can be a historic and a dynamic president, a candidate who is truly for the people and of the people, the next president of the United States of America. Bernie Sanders. For that very thoughtful and generous introduction. We have, throughout the last many weeks, and in fact many months, we have traveled all over the state of Wisconsin. We have held rallies in town and city after town and city. I just want to, as this is our last rally before the primary, to thank the people of Wisconsin for their kindness and for their generosity and for their friendship. We have had the opportunity to meet a whole lot of folks in Wisconsin. In fact, in the last week alone, we have had rallies before 35,000 people. And let me begin by talking a little bit about the momentum that you are feeling and that I am feeling in this campaign. Have won 6 out of the last 7 caucuses. And not only have we won them, we have won every one by landslide victory. And tomorrow, if there is a good turnout here in Wisconsin, if there is a record-breaking turnout here in Wisconsin, we are going to win here as well. Momentum is about the fact that when we began this campaign, the media and all of the pundits considered us a fringe candidacy. After all, they said, who in America is prepared to wage a political revolution? Well, to the experts' surprise, turns out that many millions of Americans are prepared to do just that. When we began this campaign, we were 3% in the polls, 60 points behind Hillary Clinton. Last week, there was a poll, national poll, that had us 1 point ahead. This is what momentum is in national poll after national poll. We beat Donald Trump by huge margins. Last
Trump over him by 20 points. And here in Wisconsin, a poll for your own state had us beating him by 19 points. And when Democrats want to look at which candidate is stronger against Trump, in every poll, our margin against them is greater than Hillary Clinton's. Momentum is that in every primary and caucus election held so far, we win the overwhelming majority of young people. And by young people, I'm not just talking about 20-year-olds. You know, when you get older, the definition of young goes up. Someday you'll know that. But we are winning consistently people 45, 50 years of age or younger. You know, when the campaign began, what we heard is that young people are apathetic. They really don't care about the future of this country. They're not going to get involved in politics. That is not what the pundits are saying today. Young people are the future of this nation. And they want to help shape the future of this nation. What this campaign is doing, and why I believe we have been so successful, is we're doing something very unusual in American politics, and that is we are telling the truth. Now, there's something about the truth that is not always pleasant. It's not always pleasant in our personal lives, and it's certainly not pleasant in our political life. But what I believe from the bottom of my heart is we cannot go forward as a nation unless we have the courage to honestly confront the real problems, the real issues that we face, and that is what this campaign is about. Truth, number one, unpleasant but true. Today in America, we have a corrupt campaign finance system which is undermining plurality wins. What it does not mean is that billionaires should be able to buy elections. All of you know, a number of years ago, Supreme Court passed one of the worst decisions in the history of the United States, the so-called Citizens United decision. If elected president, no nominee of mine to the Supreme Court will get that job unless he or she is crystal clear they will vote to overturn Citizens United. When you have a handful of billionaires, like the Koch brothers and a few others, you are familiar with the Koch brothers. is about 20 wealthiest people in this country owning more wealth than the bottom 150 million people, half of American society. What a rigged economy is about is one family, the Walton family, who owns Walmart. You know the Walton family as well. You guys know a lot of people. That one family owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. One family. All right, now, let me tell you something about the Waltons and Walmart. Turns out that what a rigged economy is also about is that the wealthiest family in America pays its employees at Walmart wages that are so low that many of those workers are forced to go on Medicaid and food stamps. And you know who pays for those Medicaid and food stamps? You do. A rigged economy is when the middle class and working class of this country has to subsidize the wealthiest family in America who pay their workers starvation wages. So I say to the Walton family, get off of welfare. Start paying your workers a living wage. But it's not only distribution of wealth. I want you all to think about this, because what this campaign is about is asking people to think outside of the box, outside of the status quo, not allowing corporate media to define for you what reality is. We have got to define reality. And here is reality. Here is reality. This is the richest country in the history of the world, but nobody knows it because almost all of the new wealth and income is going to the 1%. Today in America, and you all know this, you live this reality, we have millions of people working not one job, but 2 jobs and 3 jobs to cobble together enough income and health care to take care of their families. Right here in Vermont, right here in Milwaukee, right here all over America. We have moms who are working long hours, dads who are working long hours, kids who are working long hours. Marriages are stressed out. Parents don't have the time to spend with their kids. And yet after all of that, and all of you should know, that America today, our people work the longest hours of any people in the industrialized world. You know that? Japanese are very hard-working people. We work longer hours than the Japanese. And after all of that work, turns out 58% of all new income goes to the top 1%. Now, this is not an issue you're going to read about much in the newspapers. You're not going to see it at all on television. But that is the reality of American life. Middle class for 30 years has been in decline, and the rich get richer. You want to hear a radical idea? Here's a radical idea. We're going to create an economy that works for all of us, not just the 1%. But it's not just a corrupt campaign finance system and Wall Street and billionaires buying elections. It is not just a rigged economy. We have a broken criminal justice system. We have more people in jail in America today than any other country on earth Think about it. China, 4 times our size, a communist authoritarian country. They don't tolerate dissent all that well. We've got more people in jail than China. And what this campaign is about is making a promise that at the end of my first term, we will not have more people in jail than any other country. Because we are going to explore and get to the causes of why we have so many people in jail. And let me just very briefly tick off some of those reasons. First, again, you don't see this in the media at all. We have extraordinarily high rates of youth unemployment in this country. We got a study done for us a number of months ago. This is what the study said. For kids who graduate high school between 17 and 20, not high school dropouts, kids who graduate high school. Kids are white, 33% are unemployed and underemployed. Latino, 36%. African American, 51% unemployed or underemployed. That's more than wrong. That is a tragedy of huge dimensions. And what that means, if anybody here thinks there is not a direct correlation between millions of kids who have no jobs, who are not in school, and the very high rate of incarceration we have, if you don't see the connection, you're missing a very important point. So here is radical idea number 2, which is not really very radical at all. And that is, as a nation, we are going to invest in our young people in jobs and education, not jails and incarceration. Our job is to keep people out of jail. All right, let me remind you. It costs less money to send a kid to the University of Wisconsin than to lock them up. Further, we've got to take a hard look at how local police departments across this country now operate. All of us are tired of seeing videos on TV of unarmed people being shot by police officers. Now, I've been a mayor for 8 years, and I've worked very closely with the police in my state and with police officers all over this country. Let me tell you, overwhelming majority of police officers are honest, hardworking, doing a very difficult job. It is not easy being a cop today. But, like any other public official, if a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. We have got to demilitarize local police departments. We have got to make local police departments reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. We have got to end private prisons and detention centers. Corporations should not be profiting from the imprisonment and misery of fellow Americans. We have got to rethink the so-called war on drugs. Over the last received police records because of possession of marijuana. Turns out that today, as part of the Federal Controlled Substance Act, marijuana is listed as a Schedule I drug right alongside of heroin. Now, you can argue the pluses and minuses of marijuana. Marijuana sure is not a killer drug like heroin. Introduced legislation to take marijuana out of the federal controlled substance. And when we talk about drugs, let us be very clear that in my state of Vermont, neighboring New Hampshire, and all over this country, we have a major epidemic in terms of heroin and opiate addiction. And every day in this country, people are dying of overdoses. This is a crisis. And in my view, the best way to deal with this crisis is to understand that heroin addiction and substance abuse is a health issue, not a criminal issue. In mental health treatment in this country. People who are suffering from addiction or mental health crises, and let us also be honest and understand that in America today, there are thousands of people walking our streets who are suicidal or homicidal. We have got to get them treatment when they need it, not 6 months. Now, if you want to know what kind of president I will be, just think of Governor Scott Walker in opposite. Walker wants to make it harder for people to vote. I will make it easier for people to vote. Governor Walker wants to destroy labor unions. I believe in labor unions. I want to expand. I think we're not going to have a strong middle class unless we have a strong labor movement fighting for workers' rights. Governor Walker thinks it's a great idea to give huge tax breaks to large corporations and cut education. I believe we should expand funding for education and demand that the large corporations start paying their fair share of taxes. Governor Walker is working overtime trying to restrict a woman's right to choose. I believe that every woman in this country must have the right to choose. Vigorously defend a woman's right to choose. We are going to take on Governor Walker and all of those other governors who are restricting that. This campaign is doing well because we are listening to the American people, not wealthy campaign contributors. We are listening to working people who tell me that they cannot make it on $8 or $9 an hour. And that is why we are going to raise the minimum wage in this country to $15 an hour. This campaign is listening to senior citizens and disabled veterans. A great nation is judged not by how many millionaires and billionaires it has. It is judged by how it treats the weakest and most vulnerable people amongst us. That is a great nation. Today, in my state of Vermont, in Wisconsin, all over this country, we have millions of seniors trying to get by on $11,000 or $12,000 a year Social Security. And you know what? You can't get by on $11,000 or $12,000 a year. If you can believe it, many of my Republican colleagues in the Senate want to cut Social Security. I've got very bad news for them. We're not going to cut Social Security. We're going to expand Social Security. This campaign is listening to women. And women are telling me they are sick and tired of working for 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. They want the whole damn dollar. And I know that every man in this room will stand with the women in the fight for men. This campaign is listening to young people. And what young people are telling me is, why does it happen that because they do the right thing, they go out and they get an education, they end up $30,000, $50,000, $70,000 in debt? And they're right. Why are they being punished for getting an education? They should be rewarded, not punished. We live in a competitive global economy. We need the best educated workforce in the world. And yet today in America, there are hundreds of thousands of bright, young, qualified people. They can't go to college because their families lack the income. And we got millions of people struggling with outrageous levels of student debt. Now, when we think about public education, I went to public schools. My family never had a lot of money. When you think about public education today, you can't just think about first grade through 12th grade. The world has changed. The economy has changed. People need more education. When we talk about public education today, what we must be talking about is making public colleges and universities tuition free. My mom and dad never went to college. There are millions of families where parents have never went to college. There are children in the 4th grade, 6th grade, high school who in a million years do not dream that it is possible for them to go to college. What I want them to know is that in this country, if the kids study hard, if they do well in school, regardless of the income of their families, yes, they will be able to get a college education. And we will substantially lower student debt by allowing people the right to refinance their loans at the lowest interest rates they can afford. This campaign is listening to people whose voices are rarely heard. We are listening to the Latino community. What the Latino community is telling me is that we have 11 million undocumented people in this country. Many of them are being exploited because they have no legal rights. Many of them are living in fear and living in the shadows. The Latino community wants, and I agree, comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. This campaign is listening to the African American community. What they are telling me is, how does it happen that we have trillions of dollars to spend on a war in Iraq that we never should have gotten into? But somehow we don't have the funds to rebuild inner cities in America, including Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was in Flint, Michigan a month ago, and what I saw and what I heard was literally unbelievable. Hard for me to believe that I was listening to people living in the United States in the year 2016, people whose children were being poisoned by a water system that had excessive amounts of lead. But it is not only Flint, Michigan. That may be the worst case. But all over this country, we have educational systems inadequate, housing stock falling apart, roads and bridges collapsing. We have got to rebuild not only inner cities throughout this country, we have got to rebuild our entire collapsing infrastructure. And a $1 trillion investment in that will rebuild our schools, rebuild housing, rebuild roads and bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, levees, dams, airports, and our rail system, and create 13 million good-paying jobs. This campaign is listening to the Native American community. Anybody who knows anything about American history knows that from day one, before this country was a country, Native Americans were lied to, they were cheated, and many treaties that were negotiated were abrogated. We owe the Native American community a debt of gratitude that we can never repay. And yet today, many of their communities and reservations have outrageous levels of poverty, unemployment. Teenagers are killing themselves in horrible rates. Alcoholism, drug abuse, schools that are inadequate, health care that's inadequate. If elected President of the United States, this government will change its relationship with the Native Americans. truth that if we ignore, we will ignore not only at our own expense, but at the expense of our kids, grandchildren, and future generations. I am a member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Environment. I have met with scientists all over this country and all over the world, and here is the truth. The debate is over. Climate change is real. It is caused by human activity, and it is already doing devastating damage to this country and around the world. And here is another truth. What the scientists say as clearly as possible is if we do not get our act together in a very short few years, all of the problems we are now seeing will become much, much worse. And by the end of this century, planet Earth will be 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. What that means, more drought, more flood, more extreme weather disturbances, more rising sea levels, more acidification and destruction of our oceans, more international conflict as people fight over limited natural resources. We must not allow that to happen. And together we will tell the fossil fuel industry that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of this planet. Now, I have been criticized for saying this, so let me say it again. Because I don't want any confusion on this. I believe that health care is a right of all people on earth. There is one major country on earth, that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. You are living in it, and together we're going to change that embarrassment. The Affordable Care Act, and I'm on the committee that helped write that bill, has done some very good things. We should be proud of President Obama's leadership and what that bill has accomplished. But despite the gains of the Affordable Care Act, 29 million Americans today still have zero health insurance. Many of you are underinsured with high deductibles and high copayments. Is that right? And then, on top of that, we are getting ripped off every single day by the unconscionable greed of the drug companies. These people are without conscience. Here is crazy. When you hear crazy, this is crazy. Today in America, 1 out of 5 Americans who go to their doctors to get a prescription cannot afford to fill that prescription. That's nuts. Today, senior citizens in Wisconsin, Vermont, all over this country are cutting their pills in half because they cannot afford the medicine they need. Today, a year ago, a new drug comes out, hepatitis C, which many of our veterans suffer from. That pill costs $1,000 a pill. So what I believe is that at a time when we end up spending far more per capita on health care than do the people of any other country, that we have got to do what every other major nation does, and that is pass a Medicare for all single-payer system. And when we do that, we're going to lower health care costs by thousands of dollars for middle-class families. Now, everybody here knows that real change, and that is what this campaign is about. But I have said over and over again, and I repeat it to you, no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone. The powers that be are just too powerful. Wall Street, corporate America, the corporate media, the wealthy campaign contributors. No president alone can take them on. What we need are millions of Americans across this country standing up and saying loudly and clearly, enough is enough. We need a government which represents all of us and not just the 1%. And that's what this campaign is about. Now, all of you who know American history know that real change, significant change, has never taken place from the top on down. It is always from the bottom on up. 100+ years ago, when workers had no power on the job, when they were working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, when children were working in factories, when workers could be fired arbitrarily, paid anything their bosses wanted to pay them. Workers said, we are not beasts of burden. We are human beings. We will have dignity on the job. And millions of people came together to form unions to negotiate contracts. Hundreds of years ago in this country, when slavery was still in existence, you had African Americans and their allies working hard, going to jail, dying, getting beaten throughout our history to say that racism and segregation and bigotry will end in the United States of America. This didn't happen from the top on down, it happened from the bottom on up, and we do not know how many of those heroes were killed, were died, beaten. We don't even know their names. But that's what happens when people at the grassroots start moving. 100 years ago, and how quickly we forget this. How many people don't even know this? 100 years ago from today, women in America did not have the right to vote, could not go to the schools they wanted to, could not get the jobs they wanted to. 100 years ago. But what women did is they stood up. They went on hunger strikes. They went to jail. And they and their male allies said that women in America will not be second-class citizens. If we were in this room 10 years ago, no time at all from an historical perspective, somebody would have jumped up and said, you know, Bernie, I think that by the year 2015, gay marriage will be legal in 50 states in this country. The person next to him would have said, you are nuts. That can't happen. But it did happen. And it happened. It didn't happen because a conservative Supreme Court made it happen. It happened because for decades, gays and their straight allies stood together and faced incredible bigotry and hatred. But they persisted, and they said that in this country, people should have the right to love whoever they want, regardless of their gender. Let me is $7.25 minimum wage, federal minimum wage. This is a disaster. It's a starvation wage, and we have got to raise that minimum wage to $15 an hour. The person next to her would have said, $15 an hour? You're out of your mind. You want to more than double the minimum wage. You can't do that. Be realistic. Don't be so crazy. Don't be so radical. Maybe $8, maybe $9 an hour, maybe $10. Who knows? But $15 an hour, that is an outrageous, radical, crazy idea. But you know what happened? What happened is that workers in the fast food industry, people in McDonald's, people in Burger King, people in Wendy's, they went out on strike. And they told their communities, and they told this country, they cannot live on starvation wages. And then you know what happened a couple of years ago? Seattle, Washington, $15 an hour. Los Angeles, California, San Francisco, $15 an hour. Oregon, $15 an hour. California, $15 an hour. I'm elected President of the United States, $15 an hour in every state in this country. Now, I am proud to have marched and stood on the picket lines with some of these people fighting for $15 an hour. And that is how change comes about. And that is the point of this entire campaign. What the establishment and the media wants you to believe is that what exists today is what has got to exist 5 years from now and 20 years ago. 20 years from now, that we cannot make change. Do not believe that. If we stand together, and if we have a vision, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. That is the history of America. And right now, and I've been all over this country, from Maine to California, and I've seen people looking around them and they're saying, you know, the status quo today is not acceptable. It is not acceptable that the middle class continues to disappear and almost all new wealth and income goes to the 1%. It is not acceptable that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all of our people or paid family and medical leave. It is not acceptable that we have a corrupt campaign finance system. It is not acceptable that we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. Not acceptable that women make 79 cents on the dollar. Not acceptable that kids can't afford to go to college or are leaving school equally in debt. People all over the country, they're looking at the status quo, and in this pivotal moment, they are saying, we can do much better. Not only for ourselves, but for our kids and for future generations. So what this campaign is about, it's not just electing a president. It is bringing forth a political revolution and transforming America. Tomorrow here in Wisconsin, you have a very, very important primary. And let me be very honest with you. It's going to be very close, I believe. Some of the polls have us up, some of the polls have Secretary Clinton up. But what has happened throughout this campaign is when there is a large voter turnout. When working people, many of whom have given up on the political process, come back in, reclaim their democracy, and stand up and fight back, then we win. So I'm here tonight to ask all of you, not only to come out to vote tomorrow, bring your friends and your relatives and your aunts and your uncles. Bring your neighbors, bring them all out, drag them out. If we win here tomorrow, it will be a major step forward in this campaign. It turns out that for whatever reason, Wisconsin historically has played an enormously important role in determining who the President of the United States is. So let us make Governor Walker unhappy tomorrow. Let us have a huge voter turnout. Okay, Wisconsin, thank you so much. Take care.
It's on us
to create an environment where women feel and
From California, come on, to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream Wall.